Okay, so here's my nitpicky review of the Evolution Tools EVOSAW380. That this piece of steel is separate from this casting. It can be taken out, but the way that it was machined, it's coarse. They used a fly cutter or something, and it's got little striations in it, and this gets hung up on there. Now, yeah, you can loosen the bolt up underneath of there so that this is a little more sloppy and then it slides, but I don't want it sloppy. So I've just kind of learned that I gotta do that with it. That's really nitpicky. It's a good clamp. I like this clamp. I like the wheel. I like this style of quick release, and this is a nice heavy casting. I like not having the sheet metal here. They do include this too, by the way, for cutting round stock and cutting square tube on the prism, as they say. You know, corners at top and bottom and front to back. The other thing, this back fence is not perfectly straight. If I can take one of these feeler gauges, and you've got a gap in the middle, not at the end, but in the middle. So there's a slight bow to this fence. It's very slight. If you're cutting a big piece of black pipe or a big piece of steel tubing, it's not going to matter. But if you're cutting a little hobbyist aluminum extrusion, and you put that in here, you clamp it down, the clamp pivots and it pushes the extrusion right into that bow and cuts slightly out of square. That's really nitpicky. This isn't a miter saw. Evolution Tools makes a metal cutting miter saw, and I'm sure that saw is going to have a perfectly flat fence, and it's going to be more accurate. This is a metal cutting chop saw. They kind of make these for moving around to job sites and for fabrication use. That's typically you're just cutting something off. But anyway, moving on. That I noticed is that, and I'll show you the underside of this saw, is that, when you see all the pictures of these saws with these nice heavy castings, you see the pictures from the top, you don't realize that, the steel is not as thick as you think it is. It's got all these formed reinforcing shapes in here. So it isn't, half an inch thick or 3/8 inch thick or 3/4 inch thick steel casting. It's thinner than that. But I like the castings better. The other thing I noticed is it has these nice rubber feet on the front, but not on the back. I don't know why. It doesn't have the rubber feet on the back. I suppose this chip tray gets in the way, so anyway, the nice rubber feet all around I think probably would have been nice. And I kind of wonder why all the manufacturers seem to put the chip tray on the back. Wouldn't it make more sense to have the chip tray accessible from the front or from the side, so that you don't have to swing the thing around away from a wall or whatever every time you want to empty the chip tray? That's really nitpicky, I know, but it was just one of the things, because the chip tray does fill up. I mean, you get a lot of chips in there. So the other issue that I ran into with this saw is that it was out of square on the vertical. So the blade was not coming down plumb. It was coming down, out of square. And fortunately, the Evolution Tools castings are in two pieces. The base is one piece and this is another piece. And they're bolted at the bottom. I was able to loosen those bolts, and I was able to take a cheap set of feeler gauges, take the nut out, take the feeler gauges that I needed, use them as shims, and shim it up and dial it right on. Well, I thought, you know what? What are the other brands that have the castings? Do they have some sort of a out of round bolt or some sort of a set screw system? Do they have something to adjust for out of square, out of plumb? And they don't. It's those other brands have one piece castings. So if they're not perfectly manufactured, exactly plumb from the factory, maybe they are. I don't know. There's no way to adjust them that I could find. I tried to find parts breakdowns for those other brands. I was able to find a complete parts breakdown of this saw and try to understand if there was any adjustment here, and there isn't. And if I'm wrong, please leave a comment in the comments. And I couldn't find on other brands' websites a complete parts breakdown. I could find a user's manual sometimes, and but not a complete parts breakdown. So I was never really able to determine if there was some sort of a mechanism or way to square up those other brands. So I'm happy with this saw. I had to hack it a little bit, but it's hackable. And you know what? To me, hackable has value. Because I was able to take the matters into my own hands and get it dialed in. I mean, really, really right on. And so I'm happy with this saw. I'm glad that I picked this saw. That's my nitpicky review of the EVOSAW380.